Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Sussex Milwaukee School Board to order. Mr. Becker, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Burns,
Present.
Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser, here, Mr. Keller,
Here.
Ms. Steele, here, Mrs. Carr, here, Mr. Sickich,
Present.
Mrs. Lee, here, President Lee.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications to the agenda this evening?
There are no modifications.
All right, we'll move right into the superintendent's report.
Good evening, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. Legislative updates. Senate Bill 990, the Assembly passed the amendment, which will delay the implementation of the literacy screener until January 2025. This will allow districts to provide professional development training necessary to implement the screener with fidelity. This is related to Act 20. We are glad for the reprieve a bit to allow us to plan accordingly and to meet the guidelines set up by Act 20 on last year. So again, the implementation is delayed until January 2025 for the Act 20 literacy science initiative. Assembly held sessions on February 15th and 20th. Education-focused proposals took up a significant portion of the Assembly agendas. The chamber took up legislative across a variety of proposals, including truancy in K-12 education, teacher licensing pathway changes, and private choice independent charter school funding and regulation. So we do have a full list of variety of topics. They also include human trafficking, grants for school safety, and competitive bidding thresholds proposed for school districts. I do want to send recognition out for Nathan Hill High School and congratulations to Mr. Matt Marino and the ninth grade students that engaged in a unit on designing affordable model homes. Students designed, built, and marketed homes based on Frank Lloyd Wright's American system to solve the affordable housing crisis in our city. Teams collaborated and needed to think critically and creatively in order to solve the problem of how to house the average American family in an efficient, economical, and life-enhancing work art, and how to seize new technologies and production techniques. Students presented projects to classmates, family members, community members, board members, also the superintendent from DPI, members from DPI, and many more as part of the school competition. CPS 58 even joined in to cover the event. I do want to send an additional shout out. I personally heard their presentations at the state educational conference, and so we want to definitely, these students were well prepared for my questions, and anyone that knows me knows I ask a lot of questions. And so I just want to thank Mr. Marino and his students for being prepared and thoughtful in their presentations. Since our last board meeting, here are the following visits and meetings I've held. Participated in the city schools meeting with the city of West Allis and the village of West Milwaukee. Instructional rounds at Mitchell and FLW. Brown bag lunches with staff at Hale, Mitchell, DLVA, Shared Journeys, and FLW. Attended the National Educators Conference, AASA. Black History Month activities at West Milwaukee. I want to send a special shout out to West Milwaukee as well for having me on last Thursday. I was a special guest as well as a judge for their door contest. So thank you for having me. Also, there's a display that's in the school, and I have to tell you, I don't look at myself as being part of history because I'm present. But however, you know, you have to take a moment and just kind of reflect on things, and they actually had a display dedicated to me for Black History Month. So I was definitely grateful for the students who put the presentation together. Jefferson Elementary School, I was a guest judge at their talent show on last Friday. I attended the Phantom Toll Booth musical at West Milwaukee on Saturday night with my family. And in this particular production, middle school students from FLW and West Milwaukee performed truly outstanding job, students during that particular play and musical. As well as on yesterday, PTA Carnival at Central. So it was a great event, well attended, beautiful weather, outstanding. I think I'm just a good luck charm for weather right now. But it was just a great event. Was good to see the turnout and participation from the community. And I do have several pictures that are from the instructional rounds as well as from Jefferson from last Friday. And so that will conclude my report this evening.
All right. Thank you very much. Move on to item 7, public comments this evening. There's no one currently set up public comments. There's no one here in person. If there's anyone who is in Zoom who came in late and would like to address the board, there's a link in the chat to do so. I'll wait for 15 seconds or so if you are in Zoom and would like to sign up for public comments. Not seeing no additional signups for public comments, I'm going to close public comments at this time. Move on to item 8, our board reports, starting with 8.1, review of our board calendar. So today, on February 26th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Then we have a financial stability and efficiency workshop on current people count, 24-25 enrollment projections, estimate of revenue limit calculations, and preliminary budget projections. And immediately following, we have a closed session meeting. Then on Monday, March 11th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and then a college career readiness workshops, gifted and talented program, human growth and development, and student representatives on the board. Then Monday, March 18th at 6 p.m., we have our school showcases. We'll have Horace Mann, Walker Elementary, Nathan Hale, Dotke PBL High School, and Deeper Learning Virtual Academy. Then on Monday, March 25th at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting. And then we have a college and career readiness workshop on transitional education center, or tech redesign that we're talking about. All right, moving on to 8.2, our board committee reports. Start with 8.2.1, employee engagement and culture. Mr. Keller.
Thank you, President Lee. So we met as a committee on last week, Tuesday, February 20th. The first piece of new business that we did discuss was the fact that we do have an offer out for the recruiter position. Zach Olson, pending board approval a little bit later, will be joining the HR team shortly. So we're looking forward to that. We did have an update as well regarding the DPI licensure and the preliminary report around that, because one of the things that we had talked about was providing assistance where needed to make sure that our educators were able to get through that process. And what we did find is right now only 7 people are actually going through that process. And they all seem to be going well. So we're still evaluating kind of how we can support and what additional support might be needed. But right now, everything is looking good. It is the time of year for the annual salary reevaluation process. So individuals have until March 1st to put in that communication if they'd like that evaluation to be completed on their behalf. As of last week, we had 15 such requests. We talked about the proposed timeline for our contracts, for our staffing contracts. And then we also talked a little bit about the substitute survey. So we are asking our subs to submit their thoughts and experiences regarding their substitute teaching by Friday, March 15th, to help us provide or to help us get some additional information on their experiences subbing in our schools in our district. So this survey was sent out to 64 individuals. And then the last thing we talked about was that Marianne has started doing snacks with the staff. So site visits to the different schools where she is there meeting with individuals and answering HR related questions. And that was the extent of our meeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Keller regarding his report? Or any topics for consideration at future agendas? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
Move on to 8.2.2, financial stability and efficiency. Ms. Kaiser.
Hi, so we last met February 19th. From old business, we do have a dependent audit going on. It got launched March 1st. Staff have received emails and we will need staff support to submit their paperwork to support our benefits audit. We talked about the 2024-2025 preliminary budget workshop. Our district and community will hear a preliminary budget workshop. This is the second year of the biennial budget in which we have known revenues for the state of Wisconsin. Much of the presentation will focus around expense assumptions in Senate Bill 653. January 2025 will be a benefits renewal, and we're currently discussing health benefits renewal options for January 2025. Senate Bill 653. This proposed bill would have students who open enroll into or out of the district will have $10,000 following them, which is an increase of $1,400. Looking to be creative to equal out the expenditures and stay within our $100,000 current projected deficit. Referendum next steps. Staff were met with on the February 19th Professional Development Day as an optional meeting. And Mr. Norris will be going to the school to discuss referendum causes and concerns.
All right, thank you very much. Does someone have any questions for Ms. Kaiser regarding her report? Or any questions to be considered at a future agenda? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Kaiser. Move on to 8.2.3, recreation and community services, Mr. Becker.
Thank you. The Recreation Committee also met last Monday, the 19th. And this is a bit of a repeat, but we do have some new information about it. The committee discussed the long-term, the strategic long-term plan. The group was able to meet, trying to call the exact date. I think I had it here, but in any case, we had 6 groups of participants involved. We had athletic directors, we had coaches, we had parents, some of the junior program coaches were there. What the groups were asked to do was to go through strengths, weaknesses, and try to identify some opportunities and also some barriers and challenges. I have a whole list of them here. It's 2 full sides if anybody wants to see some of the results and some of the opinions from people. Interesting to note, there's some overlap and a little bit of contradiction too. And we were discussing how some of that's a function of people coming from different buildings and different organizations. And honestly, the more I think about that, the more I think it really supports what we're doing, which is trying to introduce a little more regularity throughout the district, having all of our programs a little bit better synced up, make sure they're all equally supported. One of the interesting things that Shelley Strasser brought also was she asked the group to consider what are their top 3 priorities. Those are also on this. I can again pass it on if people want to see what they were and what people came up with. Some of it's facilities and some of it's just how the programs are run and staffed. Another interesting development that came about from our conversation was having a committee that would oversee the strategic plan, and that would not be somebody from the board. It wouldn't be somebody from the district. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Lee, but I believe we were looking at somebody who would be somebody who's not affiliated with a school either. We were looking for a private citizen to be the head of that committee, and then try to figure out what that committee structure would be. Well, whether there would be a 1-year term for the seat, things of that sort. Still in the process of being developed, but I think some really good progress. We're looking at trying to get the next step, which would be small groups, and breaking out into some more detailed conversations. We don't have an exact date for that yet, but I'll bring it back as soon as we have that figured out.
All right, Mr. Becker, thank you very much. Is there a digital version of your document there that you might be able to email to the board?
I'd have to ask Shelley Strasser about that. That's her document. Those are her notes from the event.
Okay.
But I'll see what we can find.
Okay, I think it'd be good if you'd be able to email it to the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. Ms. Carr?
Mr. Becker, I think I would like to see the data that you collected And could you expound just a little bit on, your thinking, the committee's thinking on having a resident or a citizen run that committee? Where did that thinking come from?
That was one of Shelley's ideas, that the whole thing has really been Shelley Strash's brainchild. So I won't steal her thunder entirely, but I will say that my agreeing with it is really about trying to get some buy-in from people other than the people who we see in the building. I think it's really important that the community takes an interest and takes an active role in these activities. I think along with some of the other initiatives we've been working on as a board, I think it really is, we're trying to get people pulled in to work with us. And I think that's just another step in that direction.
And if I can add to that too, I think, and hopefully Shelley will correct us if we're wrong, but I think part of that too with that outside source is because first of all, that would be more of like a full-time job, is to have somebody to get out there and basically kind of rub elbows, so to speak, and make connections with people out in the community and form those relationships to help support. And two, because for a lot of the different things that we want to do and we know that we need to do based on the list of ideas and things that came up, is that finances. I mean, there's going to have to be other monies that we're going to have to come up with. And so I know that was a big proponent of what I think kind of backed her thought process in this is. And so for somebody to get out and make those connections and hope that we can get more support from the community and big businesses and things like that from out and about. And again, that's more of a full-time job, nothing that any one of us could just do in our spare time. So I think that was a big part of where some of that thought came from.
That one specifically was about a coordinator for fundraising. That was a role that we talked as
Okay.
potential.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think we were kind of waiting to see what the committee would look like and what their views would be on whether that was going to be something they could support. Still, again, taking shape, but an idea that was proposed.
Yeah.
So we were talking about two different things there.
Yeah, sorry, my
Right.
fault. That one. Yeah, that was
Related,
There was a few different things we were spitting out the other day.
So the thinking behind that is to kind of have a person to facilitate the work. It's someone who's not involved in the work, someone who can really come and move the work forward, who doesn't have, a say in it, doesn't have any interest in it, only just to get the work done and to make sure that we have consensus.
I think part of it is also making sure we have someone who's dedicated to just that role instead of asking a teacher or a coach to put on another hat and pull from their other duties.
So would that be a
For a while.
paid position?
That was kind of what it seems like. Again,
I can find out that answer and
Yeah.
talk about it, but I don't know if she meant it to be a full-time position or not.
it was pretty conversational, honestly.
Yeah, I know she
It
did say
wasn't
someone that would
really-
be here for a while. I know she did say that,
Okay.
so, which would lead me to believe that maybe, and that's why too, I think not a coach or something too, so there wasn't that bias, the possibility of a bias for any way, shape or form.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Becker regarding his report? Or items to be considered for future agendas? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Becker. On to 8.3, board member reports and committee events. Any events board members attended that would like to report on? Ms. Kaiser?
The West Dallas, West Milwaukee Theater continues to be amazing. The show Phantom Toll Booth was really wonderful and really sweet and was really well told by the students involved. And I know Alice in Wonderland is coming up pretty soon for auditions. So that's another, I believe, at least middle school. I don't know if it's middle and high. So something to look out for. I also did see our Dr. Luxman scholarship buckets get passed around, which was nice to see. We had kids doing it for us. So, the scholarship deadline for that is April 15th, and there is ways to apply. So for those of you out there looking for application for a scholarship of some sort, go check it out.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to report on items they attended? Ms. Cobb?
Well, on Friday, I did join Dr. Robinson and I was a guest judge at Jefferson as well. And it was really America's Got Talent, but it was Jefferson's Got Talent. And there were 15 groups that presented, and then we actually scored them with a rubric, and then there was a first, second, and third place. And I will tell you what talent. We had magicians, we had kids that told jokes, we had a lot of singing, a lot of choreographed, kids that did choreographed. What else? There was a whole bunch, like,
Skits.
yeah, little skits, that they, made themselves. It was delightful and we had a great time and, I would definitely do that again. And then I did go to the PTA Carnival as always. It was wonderful. Lots of parents, lots of booths for the kids to enjoy.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carr. Anyone else like to report on events they attended? Mr. Becker?
I went to a couple seventh grade FLW volleyball games. Made it over to West for the Phantom Toll Booth Friday evening. Great job, everybody. Again, it was nice to see just our middle schoolers. That's the first middle school only production I've seen. So that was really fun. Made it to a couple of buildings with Dr. Robinson and some of our deeper learning coaches and administrators last week. Walked through and did instructional rounds with the Mitchell group, which was really great to see. And hats off and thanks to the veteran teachers who had a half a dozen people in their classroom in the middle of the day. I thought it showed a really, really open mind to growth and like just an eye to improvement. It was really good. I'm missing one. I did a bunch of stuff this last week. So I'm missing something, but anyway, good
right.
stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Anyone else like to report on events they attended?
I did go to something. I went to the PTA Carnival yesterday, so that was actually really fun. Always enjoyable. It's like been like that's my 10th or 11th year. Every year that they just do a really good job. So it was great seeing all the families come out, and of course, thanks to the PTA Council and then all the local units who donate their time and energy, and they're the ones they buy all the little trinkets too. So they're money too. So it was a good time.
Absolutely. All right, anyone else? I'll just say did go to a bunch of things that I was at, instead of recounting it, but all right, thank you very much. And then 8.4, I don't have any additional updates to this week. Let's move on to item 9, our consent agenda this evening, starting with 9.1, approval of minutes from regular Board of Education meeting on February 12th and our board workshop on February 19th. Our employment 9.2, our employment summary, 9.3, supplementary contracts, and 9.4, our financial summary. Does anybody anything separated out? Now I'd look for a motion.
So
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes.
I'm gonna ask Zach Olson to come up. Zach Olson is the new recruiter for our district, and we're proud to have him, not only because he's our new recruiter, but because he's an alum of our district. And we're showing that we're bringing talent home. So I want to give Zach an opportunity just to introduce himself and to bring greetings.
Yeah, I'm Zach. I was able to meet some of you earlier, so hello to everybody. Yeah, I'm just really excited about the opportunity and grateful for this chance to kind of serve the community that served me so well over the years. Like Dr. Robinson said, I'm a Central grad, so grew up in West Allis and has a soft spot in my heart. So really excited to get started and hit the ground running and share some of my experiences and turn this into a great opportunity.
Congratulations.
Welcome. Welcome. Congratulations.
Zach.
All right. Well, I'll move on to our action items for this evening, starting with 10.1, the request to alter school district boundaries. Dr. Robinson, Mr. Norris.
So I'm going to kick off the presentation tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to the brain trust. That it is Aaron Norris, who is the expert in this particular topic. However, he and I have gone back and forth kind of pretty much all weekend trying to figure out how do we respond. And so the best that we know how to respond is just to respond with the facts. and to really bring some things out where we're going to go. We're going to go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So tonight we're going to start with some historical background and bring some context to kind of how we got to this particular point. We'll talk about the actual request. Then we'll go through the different criteria, the 9 criteria in the statute that Wisconsin has stated must exist. So we'll have a quick summary and then we'll pause for any questions or comments. Right. So in 1947, the Milwaukee County School Committee formed to consider school district consolidations in and around Milwaukee County. In 1954, January 19th to be exact, West Allis Common Council annexed territory from the town of Greenfield, which included the school district of Parkway and Johnson. In 1954, same year, the city of West Allis annexed from the town of Wauwatosa, the territory of La Follette and Lane school districts. In 1954, Milwaukee County Committee received a petition signed by 154 residents of the New Berlin portion of the Parkway School District. It requested that the portion of the New Berlin district that was known as Parkway, number G6 district, be permitted to continue in the West Allis system. And this is taken directly from the 100 years of West Allis, West Milwaukee schools. And so this is not something that we're making up. This is what's been researched and we've come to find out in our artifacts. I want to go back one second for that last bullet. You know, if you stand in one place long enough, sometimes things come back. And what we're finding is, you know, some 60 plus, 70 plus years ago, people wanted to come, and all of a sudden now there's this exodus on the way out. And I think the last situation from last year has really set a bad precedence. And we're going to kind of talk about that. And as we work through this particular presentation, because when you talk about what's in the letter of the statute or what's in the will of the statute, you know, we have to think about what's in good faith and what's in the best interest of kids and the kids as a whole. And when you have this seesaw effect of being able to jump back and forth, that's not good precedent. And it sets a bad standard. And that's what we are here to say, that this is a great place to be. And we're going to go through some things that really compare us to our neighbors. And you're going to see some things I think that are going to surprise you. But I will say this to those who have not been in our schools. Come by. Come see me. I'll take you. Come walk in our schools. We are encouraging individuals to walk in our schools and see what it's about. Because Facebook and these other social media things that are out there are not telling the true story. They don't talk for me. We're the ones who talk for our district. And so we are talking tonight about the pride that is West Allis, West Milwaukee School District. So at this particular point, as we get into the 9 criteria, next one, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Norris and allow him to lead us through this presentation.
So we'll kind of just jump ahead here to the 9 criteria. So I'll go through each of the 9 criteria, followed up by factor 9. Is that loud enough? Sorry. The 9th criteria is considered other criteria as determined by the state statute. So we'll start with criteria 1, which is the geographical and essentially the characteristics around the travel time from the requested petitioner's addresses to the schools, the neighborhood schools for the kids in both districts. So I just want to point out that the information that the petitioners gave 2 weeks ago was incorrect, just factually incorrect. So what we're going to do is walk you through what it looks like to travel from a petitioner's home to school in one day, in 1 year, and in one career over a child's life, because that's what this is about. It's about how long does it take me to drive to my child's school for kindergarten, for first grade, for second grade, all the way to senior year, multiplied by the number of days and the number of years. So you can see here
that from 3510 South Sandalwood Drive and the other petitioner's address is 3520. So there's no nominal difference here, right? To Hoover Elementary, it's 0.7. To Frank Lloyd Wright, it's 3. To Nathan Hale, it's 2.4. So you can see some, Frank Lloyd Wright is further than Eisenhower, and Nathan Hale is further than Eisenhower, right? But Hoover is much shorter than Orchard Lane. So let's look at what that means. So the annual miles traveled in a year for someone who takes their kid from that address to Hoover is 119.7 miles versus 457.6 miles, multiplied by the number of school days in that calendar, right? So you can see that's done for every single band where a student that if they lived at one of those addresses would attend. When you add that up over a career, because a student would attend 6 years in elementary school, and an elementary school in Berlin at 7 years versus 3 in our middle schools versus 2, right? Going through it, the total miles traveled in a career for a student living at that address in West Dallas would be 3,944 miles versus 5,209 miles. Even if the number of days going back were the exact same, it would be longer for a student to drive to the Berlin schools versus our schools. So it's factually incorrect. That's criteria 1. Criteria 2 focuses on the educational. I'm trying to break down the language here. It's lots to read, right? It focuses on the educational programs currently offered by each affected school district and the ability and the commitment of the school district to be able to maintain those programmings should this petition be detached, right? So one slide here, or more than one slide, but one slide to set the stage here. And I want to go through this very specifically with each of you. So on the 12th, the petitioners argued that due to academic test scores, the West Dallas West Milwaukee School District is not adequately servicing students who live in New Berlin, but attend our school district. That's what they were saying. The snapshot they gave us shows the difference between our district and New Berlin, but it's incomplete in my opinion, because it shows our whole school district versus their whole school district. But if you go back, that's not what they were saying. They were saying the students who live in New Berlin that attend our school districts aren't receiving the same level of education as a student in New Berlin. That's different, right? So what they're alleging is students who live in New Berlin but attend our school districts aren't provided as a quality of education as a student who lives in New Berlin and attends New Berlin School District when comparing academic outcomes. So when they showed both districts, it's an inaccurate representation. So what we want to do for the purposes of tonight is show you how does a student who lives in New Berlin but attends West Dallas, West Milwaukee score on state assessments versus how do students in New Berlin score on the same state assessments? Okay, holistically, any student in New Berlin, right? So we took multiple data points to show you, hey, good and bad, right? So here's a good example. ELA 3rd through 5th, New Berlin students at Hoover versus Orchard Lane students in New Berlin. You can see Hoover has more students below basic, less students at basic, and more students at proficient advanced. So to me, this tells me if I have a student that lives in New Berlin, I'm more likely, I have a better chance of a student being proficient and advanced at Hoover versus Orchard Lane. Just a fact. That's based on the 22-23 ELA 4 exam. Here's another data point. 9th to 10th grade ELA ACT Aspire. You can see, we have less students at Hale who are from New Berlin who are proficient and advanced, but we have more students that are basic and less students that are below basic. So again, this to me is like, maybe it's a wash. Maybe if you combine basic, proficient, and advanced, we're a little better. You take basic out, we're a little bit worse. Nominal difference. Again, this is apples to apples data comparison. Okay. You go to math ACT Aspire at the high school, you can see, hey, we're a little bit worse here, right? The point here is that when you throw everything in a vacuum and go, well, what's it look like? It takes out all the other things that impact someone's life and their upbringing that may impact how they score on these state assessments. Okay. Here's a great example. So when you look at the whole district, and the petitioners would like to look at the whole district to use this as their comparison measure. But the reality is by doing this, it doesn't take into account other factors such as socioeconomic status, disability status, ethnicity, and race. And I don't want to go through all of them now because that's criteria 7, but I want to show you this because these things impact academic outcomes. A good example, this is below, this is academic disadvantage percentage across New Berlin, West Dallas, West Milwaukee, and the New Berlin students attending West Dallas. So a student in the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District is more than 4.5 times more likely to be living in poverty than someone in New Berlin. That's a fact from the state report card. Students who live in New Berlin but attend our schools are twice as likely to be living in poverty as compared to New Berlin too. So the fact that students on these assessments are keeping pace with students in New Berlin, to me, like from a research perspective, is we're doing a really good job with kids that are coming. We're getting them in and moving them along just as well as neighboring districts are. So to me, this is not a fundamental argument. In fact, it's a flawed argument. So for that reason, I disagree again with the petitioners on criteria 2. Criteria 3 is whether the proposed detachment will have an adverse effect on program, meaning if the detachment were approved, it would leave the district with inability to offer similar program they've continued to have. So this one's one slide. I got it mixed up. So this is really, to me, where the snowball effect comes into play here. So a snowball effect, and you'll see this slide multiple times for different criteria because it applies multiple times tonight. A snowball effect is defined as a situation in which something increases in size or importance at a faster and faster rate. The petitioners argue that since there's only 2 properties, that the detachment would have no adverse impact on the West Dallas School District. Again, if you look at things in a vacuum, that's true. But when you look at it with a broader scope and stop going an inch deep and a mile wide and go a mile deep and a mile wide, you start to look at things a little differently. In reality, in my opinion, nothing's further from the truth. The petitioner said they only pursued this detachment due to a previously approved petition in 22-23, in which 160 properties were detached. The estimated property value of the detachment then was over $40 million, which resulted in the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District losing over $480,000 in property tax revenue. Now, this petition is another 2 properties with a taxable value at $586,000. So through the snowball effect, combining the 2, because they connected them again, that's 162 properties and totaling over $140.5 million. The petitioners would argue that the snowball effect isn't real, but when you take into consideration that they themselves pursued this because of that prior petition and the total lost value in property revenue, it's clear that petitions like this do have an adverse effect on school district property and revenue, which impacts our staff and students. And should I multiply this out over the total property value in New Berlin, it certainly would leave us in a position where we'd have to look at cutting programming, losing teachers, losing revenue, tax mill rates going up, and I'll address that later. So again, in a vacuum, no, but the broader picture again is that it does. And this one is connected. These petitions arguably are the same thing. Looking at educational programming, this will come up again. If you look on the left here, you can see our school board approved class size matrix. You can see in green that our average class size in the elementary is an average of 24 per building. And in New Berlin, the average is 28. So educational programming perspective, the programming in terms of class size, which is one of the most frequently looked at things at school districts from terms of a parent or a teacher, is how many kids are in my class. I can see some of you nodding, former teachers here. Like that's the one thing most people ask. Clearly that we're in a better position here than New Berlin as well. Testimony of and written statements filed by residents of affected school districts. So the petitioners cited from themselves as they relate to the following 4 things. They had 1, concerns about overall test scores as they compare New Berlin School District, history of poorly managed resources, 3, a proposed referendum which will increase property taxes, and 4, they made a comment about that their property resides in Waukesha County and the school district of West Dallas is in Milwaukee County. Okay, so we're going to go through each 4 of those. The first one we already addressed during criteria 2. As we stated, students who reside in New Berlin but attend the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District scored just as high on state standardized tests as students who live and attend New Berlin School District. That we addressed this already. Number 2 is the reference to essentially a bad financial history. And while we can't do things to fix what happened 20 years ago at that moment, we certainly have addressed the elephant in the room. And for all serving purposes in my role as the chief financial officer, there's no argument here that New Berlin's in a better financial place. Just look at the total fund balance. almost $66.5 million versus 19. Our district is not 3 times bigger than theirs. Okay. So that alone, you can look at the percent of fund balance versus expenditures. We have a similar credit rating. That's great. I'm not suggesting New Berlin's in a bad financial position, but we're in a much better one. So the mistakes of like 20 years ago are like well beyond gone. And that's a sediment to everyone in this room and the staff in our building. So I'm not sure how long back, how far back to keep looking, but certainly those things are gone. So
You want questions now or at the?
sure, we can take them now.
No,
Yeah.
I just have a question. How come on that last slide, New Berlin's is 22 and ours is 23?
Yeah, we inquired that their latest, so the audit that happens for 22-23 has to happen before they're published, and theirs hasn't been published yet. So this is the most recent data we
I
have.
didn't know if it was a typo or what.
No, it's a good question. We inquired, but that was the most recent one they had. So. Okay, the number 3 was a proposed referendum, and they alluded to the tax pieces here. That was a financial reason. So we'll talk about that again, but I wanted to connect the two here. So first thing first, over the past 5 years, the New Berlin School District and the West Milwaukee School District have asked voters to approve the same number of referendums. Okay. So this like suggestion that we are just referendum crazy is not true. It's not accurate. And both were denied by the respective communities. New Berlin asked in 2019, it was denied. And we asked in 2021, it was denied as well. Okay. Just a fact. The tax impact, I want to just get into this a little bit because this again connects to the prior petition. So in 2023, as I mentioned before, 160 properties were detached from our district in New Berlin. That totaled about $40 million of total equalized property value, resulted in about $480,000 of total loss. So if you look at the table here, you can see in 22-23, in the property that our district owned in New Berlin was about $425 million. The percent of our levy was about 7%. Okay. And as you can note, as you maybe recall, should we have retained that property, that total percent of the levy would have been 7.12%. That's an important number because according to state statute, if the entire area of New Berlin wanted to detach and the amount exceeds 7% of the district that they're looking to leave, if that number's over 7, it triggers a referendum vote. Okay. So the approach here when it's over 7 is to chip away at it. Because then you can chip away at it without exceeding the 7% threshold. I see Savion nodding over here because we've talked about this 100 times. This is the way to get around that, right? So just to keep going through, now you can see it's 5.8%, right? So the whole portion could actually come to a vote, and I mean it wouldn't trigger one, right? But as you go across here, our mill rate in 22 is 655. Theirs was 689. Theirs was more expensive, right? So when you compare now, ours is 669 and theirs is 587. Well, the main reason that's that lower is because of this petition. Again, how can you say that without connecting these two things? They're directly connected. So certainly taxes are cheaper there for the school district because things like this happen. And this will only perpetuate the problem. So, okay, the last one, and maybe the most outlandish one, was the petitioner said that due to their property residing in Waukesha County, and the school district being in Milwaukee County, that's a reason that they should be able to detach. So I said, well, they can't be the only ones. In fact, there's over 100 school districts in the state of Wisconsin where they serve multiple counties. The petitioner's experience is shared with thousands of residents. So let's go through a few of them. Union Grove, Muskego, Norway, Oconomowoc, Wascom, Random Lake, Campbellsport. I won't keep going. There's 75 more on this list that I didn't share. So like if we were to have that be the reason, then this entire state needs to get redrawn because it's a thing across the entire state. Certainly not a reason to approve a detachment, in my opinion. Criteria 5, the estimated fiscal impact of the proposed reorganization on the affected school district. Essentially, it would cause financial undue harm is criteria 5. So again, we've kind of discussed this. So there's multiple ways to look at fiscal impact, right? You have to look at it now over time. You know, where your property rich, property poor areas of your community. Given that we serve 4 municipalities, I thought it'd be interesting to look at, well, what's the average home value in each municipality, right? So you can see in West Dallas, that's 240,000. That might give you kind of a glance into some of the referendum discussions we've had. We've based that 240, 100, 200, then we 240, then 300, because 240 has been like the average in the majority of our communities. So that West Dallas represents about 86% of our total equalized property value. As you look across the district, it's very evident that New Berlin is the most property rich portion of our community, which means they represent the largest equalized property value proportion of our community. And so, you know, letting individuals who have the most expensive homes in our community leave, like, doubles the impact on the people who have the least expensive homes in our community, because as a school district, our equalized property value doesn't impact the amount we get. It impacts the burden on the community, how much they pay. So if the opposite were true, it would be even less of a nominal, but the opposite isn't true. And the most property rich people want to leave, which sticks it to the people who have the least amount of money in our community. So it's it's unfair to them. So again, we talked about this. So the mill rate comparison the past 2 years, ours went up 14 cents. That's a 1.64 increase due to the over $40 million of property value leaving. New Berlin and the opposite side saw just under a 15% decrease in the property tax mill rate. Not completely all because of this, but certainly a large portion of this. Kristen?
The 2022 petition and 2023 petition have 4 zeros at the end. I was wondering
Oh.
if there were.
That's incorrect.
being
Sorry.
noticed to the front.
Yep. Yep, that's 585,000 versus 42 million. Thanks for catching that. Thank you. Okay, criteria 5. So just kind of like to conclude here, again, this is the similar slide you saw before. So the snowball effect here is the same argument, because again, these petitions are connected. So when you total them up, over $40.5 million of total property value potentially lost, certainly this will have a continued impact on our community. It already has. So by approving another one of these, it only continues to have an adverse effect on district property values and impacting people who, from a financial perspective, just facts, have the least amount of money in our community. So certainly not fair by any means. Criteria 6, I don't really have a ton of a bone here to pick. The property, regardless of the prior petition, is contiguous. I'll kind of show you here in the graphic. You can click on this interactive map that our team put together. But you can see here in red, this kind of L is the New Berlin city line. In purple is the portion of Elmbrook that is in New Berlin that attends Elmbrook School District, which is interesting. Still can't figure that out. And then in I guess the area petitioners here, this group here would have been carved out. They're not like now on the edge because of the prior petition. They were always on the edge. That makes sense. So no fight from me here on this. So criteria 7, we're getting there. This is essentially the socioeconomic level or racial composition of the pupils residing in the school district would be marginally affected by the individuals leaving the property. So again, this is, again, the snowball effect here of having multiple of these petitions be passed. I'll go through some data here, but essentially what happens when you have economically disadvantaged comparisons here, which I'll show you now. So we currently have about 179 students who attend our schools that live in New Berlin. 34.6% of that 179, 62 of those kids are from economically disadvantaged homes. Our district percentage is 63. So it's roughly twice as many, right? So a student living in New Berlin attending our schools is like half as likely to be economically disadvantaged as a kid living in West Dallas, West Milwaukee, or Greenfield, right? When you compare that to New Berlin, it's 14.2, like a stark difference. We were talking about 4.5 times more likely to be economically disadvantaged. When you look at racial demographics, New Berlin students attending West Dallas, West Milwaukee, 63% are white. West Dallas School District as a whole is 44.8, and New Berlin is 78%, right? So what does that tell you? Summary of criteria. I'll just kind of go through this. So what New Berlin, what the petitioners are really asking in terms of a snowball effect is that the people living in our communities that are asking to go are our most white and most economically advantaged people. So by as an aggregate whole, if the whole area through the snowball effect was continued to be chipped away at, our district would become more economically disadvantaged and less white, which is exactly the opposite of what criteria 7 is asking. So again, looking at it in a vacuum, probably not impacted, but looking at it from a whole, it is an impact, and it's the opposite of the intent of the criteria. So criteria 8, we've kind of hit on this. I want to go a little bit deeper on this. So again, over the past 5 years, New Berlin School District and West Dallas have asked the same number of referendums. I put in here some more details. In 19, New Berlin asked for an operational referendum for $5 million per year for continued programming. That was failed. The result of that was they deferred maintenance, no similar to us, okay? But they did cut class sizes, which is exactly that graph I just showed that showed their classes had. That was a result of that. And they reduced program offerings. We in 21 asked for a capital for a new high school. Obviously, that was not successful, similar to New Berlin's. It continued to deferred maintenance, but we had no result of programming effects that impacted kids as a result of that failure. So this is the same slide I showed you before on the class sizes. Okay, criteria 9, the last one here. So a couple other appropriate factors: snowball effect on past and future. We'll talk about open enrollment and school choice, and then we'll talk about past petitions in 23 before we finish with summary findings and recommendations. So snowball effect, to put this all together for you, right? Should this petition be approved and the snowball effect continue, which it likely will, given that this petition is a reflection of last year's, our school district would have a significant impact on it would have an impact on the future of our district. So we would stand to lose about just under $2.1 million through resident students attending our schools and through open enrollment students choicing out, because there is a net fiscal, like we get more than we pay, right? So we actually have some revenue there. You can see $70,000, assuming Senate Bill 653 passes, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But you can see also that's like revenue. And then in total property value, just over $385 million of what is left. And that it's not something you can look again in 1 year. This is like the decisions of today have impacts on the future of our district for 100 years. So like, you know, we're building a budget you'll hear later, of equalized property value at 6%. Well, 6% of 385 million is like $27 million. So now that becomes 400. And every year it just continues to grow. So like, those things are really important to consider. Like, it's not just today, it's forever. So this would have an impact on our district's revenue, on our district's programming, on our district's students, and certainly our taxpayers. So I certainly can't, I don't know how anyone could draw a conclusion that this would have no impact on our district from an aggregate whole. I just can't, I don't know how that any argument can be made about that. It doesn't make sense to me. Open enrollment and school choice. So certainly the state legislature has systems in place for students to attend area non-resident school districts, which include the following: open enrollment, the Wisconsin Parental Choice and Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. That's a voucher program through the state. That's an option for families. And homeschooling is an option. Open enrollment really is the main option for families to seek choice for their child from one public district to another district. This mechanism exists for families looking to enroll in area non-resident districts. So I wanted to show you some data here. So beyond 2020, 2021, which is the year after the referendum in New Berlin failed, okay, New Berlin's taken no open enrollment students except that 1 year, okay, because obviously funding was an issue that year. So what do you do to get more funding? You have open enrollment seats, okay? So they've taken no students. If you look in the middle column, this is the number of students that live in New Berlin that attend our schools, like their resident district is us, who've applied to New Berlin. So obviously there's families looking to go, but New Berlin won't take them. Okay. That's interesting. So when a mechanism exists in state statute for families like this that want to go, and the district they want to go to won't take them, but this option they'll exercise, I just don't understand that. You know, it raises a lot of questions in terms of what students we want to take. And that to me is inappropriate. So we'll talk about this in this slide. So what I want to do now, which is one of the most interesting things through this kind of process that Dr. Robinson and I have gone through, is I want you guys to take a look at of the 160 properties that detached last year. I want you guys to see how many kids were there from families that both signed the petition and didn't, because remember, you don't have to sign these petitions as long as they reach the 50% threshold, right? So you could not sign as long as they get enough signatures, you can get included. That happened to families. Families that wanted to stay got pulled out. So I want you to see how many kids actually ended up leaving. Because I want to like get into, is this about kids or adults? Okay. So 103 properties signed the petition. 57 properties did not sign the petition. 21 students were a result. 21 kids' parents signed the petition. Of the 21, 10 of those kids are still in our schools. Someone explain that to me. 9 of the students went to New Berlin and 2 graduated. I can't understand that. Of the 57 that didn't sign, 11 total students, 10 stayed and 1 went to New Berlin. That was a new student that's like brand new to school this year. Okay. Like they didn't have a kid yet in school, right? Like that makes more sense to me. I can't understand that, the left column. So just it's something that I don't know the answer to, but it certainly is suggested like this doesn't seem to be about like kids. I don't know what the reason would be. So quick summary and then we'll wrap up here. So the petitioners, in my opinion, provided some compelling evidence that was incomplete to support their petition to detach the 2 properties from our school district to New Berlin. And to me, this is kind of the following bullets summarize the rationale here. Travel distance in terms of annual miles and career miles are no longer for West Dallas, West Milwaukee students in New Berlin if they were to attend New Berlin schools. There's no material difference between academic outcomes of students who attend New Berlin versus students living in New Berlin and attend our school district. Allowing this petition would have a significant impact and future implications for educational programming through the snowball effect for students and families in our school district. The petitioners themselves said that in their presentation. There are over 100 school districts that span multiple counties in Wisconsin. This is not a suitable reason to allow any residents to detach. Class sizes have not increased and programs have not been cut as a result of any failed referendum. In fact, New Berlin, due to a failed referendum, has cut programming and increased class sizes, the opposite of what they suggested. Finally, it would also decrease taxes that the petitioners pay and increase taxes for community members with much less means within our school district. Okay, so to go through kind of each criteria to show would any of them support approval, denial, or indifference. In my opinion, when you look at location, time, and travel, it clearly supports denial. Educational programming, you could argue, is indifferent. Right? Certain data points is saying New Berlin's doing better. Certain data points saying that we're doing better. Certain are like a wash. I mean, it's indifferent. Educational programming certainly supports denial. Testimony and statements, you could argue it's indifferent, but nothing that they said, in my opinion, was factual. Fiscal impact supports denial. Being non-contiguous, that supports approval. Both the properties prior to the past petition and this one, them being removed would be considered non-contiguous. And then the rest of them, in my opinion, support denial. So a recommendation to kind of wrap up, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Robinson here, is we would recommend the board approve a resolution denying the petition to detach approximately 2 land parcels from the West Dallas, West Milwaukee School District at all, and attach the properties to the New Berlin schools for the reasons presented, and authorize the board president to prepare and include with the resolution a summary of the rationale for the board's denial of the petition as discussed by the board tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. So I hope that those at home and here have paid attention and tried to understand the direction that we're going with this. We are going strictly by the criteria. It's nothing personal, but we're calling a spade a spade. And you know, if something looks a certain way, it is a certain way. Unfortunately, we have kids who are involved within these decisions, and yeah, I think it's important that we fight back and really protect our kids in our district. We understand why certain things are in place as far as the statute, but when you look at how the statute is being put into play right now with this petition and then last year's petition, it goes against the spirit of the law. It's not what the law was intended to provide freedom for. And so at this particular point, we again thank you for your attention to this matter. We're going to open it up for questions.
Yeah.
Questions from the board?
I don't have a question, more of a comment. Like, I wish we could have had DPI watching this presentation, because I feel like when we denied the previous petition, it was for many of the same reasons here. We foresaw the possibility, or the likelihood, I should say, of a snowball effect, which has pretty much come to fruition. And to Aaron's point, I got the impression that it never really was about the students. It was about a bunch of adults who wanted to make a decision based on criteria that wasn't accurate or factual, for their own personal reasons. So again, I want to thank you for kind of laying this out, in a way that is pretty clear in terms of what's what. And I'm hopeful, though not optimistic, that we don't have to continue to do very many more of these in the future.
Mhm.
Anything else from the board? Scar?
Erin, I just wanted to say that I noticed that you said several times, in my opinion, and I think that it is not your opinion, it is fact. And I think that
Yes.
this presentation is all based on fact. And I don't think there's any opinion in here at all. These numbers and this research speaks to facts. And that's how Dr. Robinson started this presentation, of saying, this is not personal. This is all about the facts. And we took the time to research them and painstakingly thought through this presentation so that the public on both sides could understand why we would not want to detach.
Other comments from the board? Ms. Lee?
Well, and I guess I just want to say thank you guys again for the amount of time that goes into it. And I guess I just look as a homeowner. I go back to when I look at that little cover sheet, and it says the schools in which, my children would go to, right? And interested in home are right there. And I don't think those changed from the time homes were purchased. But it is frustrating to me how much time and energy is put into this now, not just last year, but this year on the same topic, when there's so many other things that need to be addressed. And the facts haven't changed. I mean, these facts are pretty much the same as what they were last year we went through it. But yet so much time was spent, from you going through again and having to point them out. And yet I'm pretty sure that those same pieces of paper, when those homes were purchased, said what schools and school districts those homes were a part of.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And so that just, as a parent, a home buyer, a board member, it's frustrating because that's a lot of wasted time when there's so much else that we should be doing for our kids.
Yeah.
And that is what it's supposed to be about, is our kids, not us. So I just felt the need to say that.
Stu?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say anything, but I just want to put it out there since we have a chance. We chose to come to this community. We've lived here for 18 years. We have wonderful schools, we have wonderful staff. And I'm just really getting tired of always having this narrative about our schools. I have no doubt that my son who graduated from this school, he is doing well. My other two children are doing well. We provide some of the best programming, and we do it with a community that is very diverse, that looks different, which is the way it should be, because your kids are going to go into a world where it's not just going to be your neighbors.
Cookie cutter.
You are going to be, it's a global economy. You are going to be dealing with all types of people in this world. And our schools really give all of our children that opportunity to be able to make friends that don't look like them, to learn about different families and how they live. And I think that is the biggest asset for our district. And so I just needed to say that because it's very disheartening that so many people look at a school report card, or they look at this number and that number. And again, like Dr. Robinson says, come to our schools,
Yeah.
walk through our schools, talk to our parents. We we're not just sending our kids to these schools because we're like, whatever. It's because we know that our schools have great intrinsic value and they have wonderful communities, and our kids are walking out of there with the skills they need.
It's
And
more
that's
to it than just a
Yes.
school report card, a snapshot in time. There's so much more to it.
Mr. Becker?
Thanks so much for putting it together. Will this be available for the public to read as well afterwards? Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments? Skies,
I just want to make sure we're clear, everyone's clear that if we say yes, we're voting to deny the attachment. I just wanna
I've
make
got
sure
it
people
right.
understand that.
I've got it right in front of me, so I'm ready.
Oh, yeah, I just want to make sure.
so, before I look for a motion, I just did want to state that, I want to echo everyone's thanks because I know this is the fourth presentation that I've been a part of as board member. And the presentations get more and more detailed. Because of the unfortunate fact that we have to be that detailed to really drive home the point about why this is not a good reason to detach from our school district. And that there are other avenues out there for doing such if you want to, one of which is moving, selling your property and moving to the district in which you want to reside in. That is the main reason people purchase properties, is for that purpose. But the other thing that I always think about is when you're elected as a school board member, one of the things you always have to think about is not me, but us.
Mhm.
And what is the best for the entire group? What's the best for the most? I would say, what's the best decision for the most amount of people? And I can't see allowing any properties detached from a district, since we're a landlocked district, as being a good decision for the most amount of people. That is going to cause hardship in one way or another for everyone in our district, whether it's one property or 100 properties. And it's something that I think needs to be thought about a lot for the people who are asking these questions. And if there's further action on this, that needs to be taken down the line. So with that, if anyone else doesn't have anything else they'd like to say, Mr. Becker?
Yes, well, one more thing, and I was thinking about it during the petitioner's presentation. The assertion that we're not fiscally responsible, so something to that effect. And I didn't ask the question. It just felt a bit confrontational, but I guess I just wonder if they know that everybody here has or had children in the schools. And I wonder if they knew whether we all voted to close 3 of the schools, where at least 3, I believe 4 of us had kids in those schools. So I think it really dishonors the deliberate, the completely lucid reasoning, long-term financial health that we made those decisions, difficult decisions. Just want to make sure that's in there too. And I don't know what kind of a difference that would make for the appeals or any of those other steps down the road, but I feel like that matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just described leadership, Joe. Is making a decision that impacts you negatively and then positively never impacts you. That's what good leaders do. And I mean, almost all of you have come through financially and helped this district, closing school. I mean, we've done a lot of hard things that have personally impacted many of you. You know, and so I commend all of you for that. And I think the work together speaks to that. And it's disappointing that we're hearing people say that still, in my opinion, because yeah.
So before I look for a motion, there are 2 separate items. There was the action on the resolution, the proposed resolution from administration, as well as the action for directing me or allowing me to provide a summary of our decision. So we can take those things separately or together at the discretion of the board. So do we have an opinion? Do we want to act on them individually? Do we want to take them together?
Together.
Okay. All right. So with that, I look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That passes. Thank you very much. So then we'll move on to 10.2, approval of the superintendent evaluation tool and process. That's myself and Mr. Keller, I guess. I guess no preamble, anything Dr. Roberts going to say? All right, so the board, we met previously to discuss the evaluation tool for Dr. Robinson moving forward. We put together something, we sent it over for Dr. Robinson's review. he was fine with it and said that it would look good to him. And so we just want to take formal action on that process that we talked about. Just as a reminder, I guess, and a reminder for the public as well, what we'll be looking at doing is having a formal evaluation process that we have been doing in January or March, depending on when we did it, where we actually have a formal evaluation that's going to get moved until early December, most likely. But then we're going to have an additional semi-formal evaluation process where we can have a discussion amongst ourselves about how things are going. And then the president and vice president will meet with Dr. Robinson to provide some feedback on that. And that will happen in early April. So that is ensuring that is occurring before any board changes may happen with elections that happen in early April as well. Okay. Any questions or clarifying events on that?
Just to add, that'll be kind of the process going forward. We'll look to have a mid-year every April. And then every December would be that annual evaluation process. So we'll start it this year and that would be the plan to repeat that cycle.
And in December is where we'd also decide on salary adjustments for the next contract year. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? All right, that passes. Okay, so that is through our business items for the agenda this evening. We'll move on to our workshop. Current pupil count, 24-25 enrollment projections, estimate revenue limit calculations, and preliminary budget projections. Mr. Norris.
Great, thank you. So this is kind of the, I guess, second formal meeting we have around the budget for next year. This is still the way too early to tell kind of number, but generally this is better this year than prior year. If you remember, the prior year was the beginning of a unknown biennial budget cycle. So we know a lot today. We just don't know everything today. So Dr. Robinson kind of preluded in his updates, the Senate Bill 653. We'll talk about that too. That's kind of like our biennial budget piece this year, where won't know until we know. So hopefully we'll know soon, and hopefully that's good news. But we'll go through kind of enrollments and revenue limit discussion, staffing, and then we'll get into the budget of where we're at today and kind of what will happen in the future. So I'll kind of go through and just feel free to ask questions as you have them. So the workshop agenda, we're talking about membership and enrollment again to distinguish the difference. We'll look at 24-25 projected membership and enrollment and the fiscal impact, some revenue limit calculations to kind of show you like what does that look like for next year, staffing projections and budget projections. So again, enrollment are kids actually in our schools, and membership are resident students who live in our boundaries. We receive funding for membership, for total membership, and then we our expense for students who are our members that attend other area non-resident districts, just like we receive revenue for students who are non-resident attending our schools. Our enrollment projection, we staff off of enrollment, not membership, because students in our schools require a teacher. Students who are members who are not in our schools do not require a teacher. So we staff off of that. And so the process, we've talked about that, I think last month, but the process to do that is we roll over grades and we make adjustments at transition years based on historical increases and decreases. So the big ones are, if you look here in green here, this is our current 8th grade, 480. Next year's 530. We usually see a large increase in 9th grade due to private schools, just less private schools having high school. So that's obviously one. Small decrease from 5th to 6th, and then obviously a big jump from K4 to kindergarten. So those things are all accounted for. What that looks like is a difference of 153 kids, mainly because if you focus here, currently in yellow, you can see, it's hard to see, all of our high school classes are in the 600s, and our incoming 9th grade's 530. So you can see as you look down the row, most of our grades are going to be in the mid to high 400s. So once that kind of gets through the schools, this decline projection really levels out and you'll see nominal change maybe within 0.5%. I mean, 40 to 50 kids, 70 kids would be 1%. So half that is about 0.5%. That's what I'd project way far out until that's done. So 4 or 5 years from now. So 153 kids, it's been kind of 100 to 150 has been about the normal that we've seen in the last few years. This is kind of that chart in a different way, bar graph here. To show kind of exactly what I meant. So you can see 600s here, 530 next year. So our high schools could live, you know, we'll find out this data point next year, but we could probably live around the low 500s. So we'll see as that kind of forecasts out. But we've got really 8 years of data to show that 440, 450, 460 is kind of the area that all the grades live. It did bump up a little bit here in 7th and 8th grade, so that's interesting. We'll have to play that out a little bit, but we're talking 15 to 20 kids, not a ton of students there as a difference. This is kind of how membership, the red line, overlays with enrollment. So school districts receive membership funding on a 3-year average. So if your enrollment declines 3 years in a row, you're actually paid for more kids. You're paid for more than you have. And when your enrollment goes up, you actually receive less funding than for kids you have, right? So you have 8,000 kids, 7,000, 6,000. The year that you have 6,000, you get paid for 7,000 because the average of 3, right? If the opposite's true, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, the year you have 8,000 kids, you only get funding for 7. So it's meant because the opposite doesn't happen a lot where districts grow by that amount, right? Some districts do. It's meant because families having kids has obviously declined over the past 50 years. So they try to take into account, it's difficult for organizations to cut expenses and cut staff and like realign services. I mean, it can be a big deal of like, you go from 3 foreign language programs to 2. It's not easy to do when you have 7 schools that service them all. So they know that that's challenging for districts. So that's a way they take that into account. And so we benefit from that a bit, but as the enrollment decline levels off, so does the exemption. So then we have to take that into account as it's a negative in the budget sometimes. So you can see here kind of the overall loss from membership, and then we use obviously those enrollment numbers to staff schools, and we use open enrollment to fill the void. This is kind of just another visual of that. So again, membership is a direct line to revenue limit. So our membership times the per pupil allocation we get from the state equals the total revenue limit authority. So that's why membership, 3rd Friday in September, not to confuse 2nd Friday in January, is so important because every kid you count is literally $11,403 next year. Okay. So the per pupil was set by the state every 2 years, the biennial budget process. And we'll get into what it is this year. So this year we're projecting 7,650. Again, that's not the membership number. That's the 3-year average number. Multiplied by 403 gives you a revenue limit total authority of just over $87 million. That's the 3-year average. It was 11,000 last year. We're going to receive $325 per kid. Plus we receive we are going to receive $78 in what's called the transfer of service per pupil. What that is this year, any student any service or student who requires additional services outside of what we planned for, we can submit a transfer of service to the state. A good example is a student moves in with a significant disability. We can't service the student. Now we're paying CISA to take them. Well, the amount that we're going to pay CISA, we didn't know that we had to budget for that. So then we get the amount per pupil. So they break it down by, that's $11 per kid next year. Okay. And the good news is that the state allows you to have it forever. So a good example, we added a cop at West Milwaukee. That wasn't paid for by us. Now we can submit a transfer service. So that essentially is a wash in the budget for next year. We received the money forever for that. So that's kind of a way that districts that track that well can really can pad their per pupil when they have actual expenses that are qualifying. So busing costs for those kids, similar things like that. And $78 ends up being a lot of money for us. So it's great. Anyway. Open enrollment, we discussed this. You can see 133 approved seats, 96 would be new open enrollment, 37 are the waiver students, and we added additional seats there to take into account our previous discussion with the New Berlin families who were moved either by their own choice and chose to stay, or families who were moved by not their own choice to give them a chance to come back and stay with us to finish their academic career. So we're making phone calls to those families. County or his office is doing that to explain that very clearly what they have to do to stay to make that happen. So this is open enrollment. This obviously helps our budget if we can fill all the seats. So this is kind of where you get into Senate Bill 653. I want to talk a little bit about how that impacts us. This is without it. Okay. So again, the board approved 133 new seats. The current cost without this bill is a regular education student. The amount that follows a kid is $8,618. For a special education student, the amount's actually more than we receive because they took away the funding 10 years ago. It's a long story. You used to be able to bill the district for the services. And so they removed that about 10 years ago. So we receive $11,400 per kid, and we would then pay $8,618 per student. So the net difference here, because we have more students at choice out than in, is about $8.8 million. If Senate Bill 653 passes, that 8618 on the screen here goes to 10,000. What's the impact there? The deficit for this programming goes from 8.8 million to 10.25 million. That's about $1.425 million. That's the unknown. That's the impact on the budget. So we're really watching that to see if that happens. Dr. Robinson and I co-authored a letter to the entire assembly, entire state senate, to Dr. Underlay, her department, and Governor Evers. We got some good responses from staff, or from the voting members, but they're members that already we thought would have our support. So we're anxious to see when that will be taken to the Assembly Committee on Education. So as soon as we have that, one of us or both are certainly planning to attend to speak on behalf of our district to advocate that, if anything, this becomes a gradual increase to allow districts to plan. I have a lot of issues with it. One of them, it's unfunded and it's the middle of a budget cycle. How can we plan in February for something happening in 5 months? It's just inappropriate. So hopefully we get some people to listen. If not, then at least we start to plan worst case scenario, which is what you're seeing tonight. So okay, so moving through it here. So projected enrollment leads to section size and sections. So Connie and her department's working through sections, class requests, as we call them, at the high schools and intermediates. So those numbers, we try to get to the high schools and intermediates by about spring break. So we got about a few weeks here to do that. And then that is where the puzzle starts to go together, right? So we're working through that now. This is the class size matrix. We spent time on this actually just a minute ago, and so I won't spend time on this again. But so staffing is the largest part of our budget, about 70% of our budget staffing. Why? It's salary and benefits. So efficiently staffing the schools is the best measure. It's the biggest pot to running a balanced budget. So going through this process now for 8 years now, this is the best place to spend our time, because staffing the schools appropriately leads to a lot of the problems from a financial perspective being alleviated. So what do? Enrollment projections, forecasting, finalizing course requests, and specialist staffing. That's happening right now. Working with the high schools, develop secondary schedules that like consider all the considerations, and like, AP Calc at both schools. We're gonna run it together. So we got to have that at a certain time that kids can take that, right? We have to like work as a team, not isolated, to do that. So that's what I help Connie with. And then we have a vacancy review team. So that's HR, Connie's department, my department, looking at vacancies. Any questions come to cabinet. We have a process for how that works, to what are we posting? What are we not posting? How are the moves? Things like that going on. So it's happening. It will ramp up here in the next few weeks. So projected staffing by school. We discussed this a bit about a month ago, but I'll spend a little bit of time here. So on the left, you can see all the schools, kind of hard to read, and the current number of staff they have at each school. And then that number of staff was determined by last year's projected enrollment. So not actual numbers, they're on the projection. So when you look across, like Franklin, I'll go through, they have 12 general academic teachers. That was for 243 projected students. They actually had a third Friday enrollment of 245, a second Friday enrollment of 247. Their projections at 243. So you have to look at last year's projection versus this year's projection. So 243 versus 243, no change. You would anticipate no change in staff then, right? So if you go all the way to the purple column, you can see a 0. So Franklin will still have 12 teachers. But to go through this here in yellow is what is the school's enrollment when you remove AGR, because AGR reduces it's 18-1. So for every class at 18, if you're staffing the school at 22, that means other classes should be above 22 to get it to be 22, right? So what I want to show you is that isn't the case. We're not doing that. We're not overstaffing certain classes to be over 22 and some under to bring it down to 22. So the average at Franklin in non-AGR classrooms is 20.7. So that number should be close to 22. And when you get to schools that are under 300 kids, it's difficult. You cut one more, now you're at 23. So it's just like this delicate dance. So some schools, they're really close, but they go down one by 15 kids next year, and then they're good for 5 years, right? So that's how that looks. So if you look at elementaries, the thing to look at is in yellow here. Franklin's 20.7, Hoover's 21.07, Irving's 20.64. So most of our schools are closer to 2021 than 22. Wilson's the only exception to that. They're exactly at 22, which means Wilson for the next foreseeable future likely won't have a cut because they're right at 22, right? So that is a snapshot. So a net difference of 22. The bulk of it's at the high schools, -10 because of the enrollment decline I showed. 600 in every grade this year. Now they have a high school class of 500 coming in. So that's something kind of that we'll see for the next few years here. So this staffing picture is us planning for Senate Bill 653 to pass. If it doesn't pass, a lot of this will get redone, and in a future budget meeting, we'll come back and say, hey, great news, it didn't pass, right? So this is kind of a picture of kind of what we're talking about as a potential plan to roll out. So you can see the 22 from the previous slide. This is due to enrollment projections. That represents 5.7% of regular education teachers and a total like expense savings of 1.87 million. Special education, that's -3. That's primarily at the secondaries because of you have less students, you have less kids with disabilities. That's the projected enrollment difference. Administrative at will, that's Dr. Robbins have been working on that. That's really going to be central office driven there. So that's -4. That represents 6.7%. So we're trying to do the cuts out of the schools at the biggest proportion. Student supports, staff on ESSER. We have a staff and a half on ESSER. That grant dollars are gone. And then facilities, that's I mentioned my committee, that's a custodian at CISA Parkway. So we're working on that lease with them to have that person come into the schools and provide different services there than a full-time custodian, very expensive to have there. So you can see here the total, about 3.395 million in potential savings. This is again as a plan. We're waiting for that bill to pass until we do execute a lot of this stuff. So timeline, this is the second year of the state budget. So a lot of revenue factors are known, expenses, some are known. Most unknown expenses are upcoming, along with Senate Bill 653 additional grant funding. So a lot of them come through in the spring and the summer. Health insurance is a big one, property liability is a big one, dental, a lot to come here. We've talked about this. I'll go through this. So right now, what are we what's the budget built on, right? Like how in the heck do we do this, right? So currently Brown and Brown has said 15% is like as worse as it's going to get for health insurance. Okay. That's a lot of money. Okay. So we're planning off that. Dental, we're self-insured. We currently have a renewal we believe going to be at 0% or it'll be cheaper. So that's good news. Transportation costs, I bolded the ones that we already know. We have already approved that. Crossing guard increase is 30%. That's what we're looking at. We're in negotiations still. That's the worst case it'll be. In WRS, no change to the contribution from the employer side. Utilities have come down, which is great. Last year, this was at 10%. Obviously, that did not happen. So it leveled at 8, and we're projecting about 5. Gas seems to be the most expensive, electricity and water, sewer. CPI considerations, we're building the budget at 5. CPI closed out at 4.12. So certainly some move to go down to the max CPI if needed, but building it at 5 to try to catch up for the 8 we weren't able to do last year. That's kind of the plan. And if we can, we can. And if we can't, we can't, right? 8% for property liability insurance. That's unknown at this time. Last year, it came in 100,000 better than we thought. But this has kind of been the norm the region builds off of, and then we go from there. And then school budgets are at 75% again. They were operated this year at that too, and department budgets are in this budget at 75% as well to match the schools. Okay, so what does CPI look like in terms of cost? Thought this might be helpful for you guys to see. So if the board approved 4.12%, that'd be about $2.1 million addition to the budget. And then 4.5 is about 193,000 more. 5% is 448, and 6% is about $1 million more than that. So you can kind of see the difference in what CPI does in terms of budget increases. So certainly something we can talk about as we proceed to the next month and a half and what we want to do. So current projected deficit, I think that's actually incorrect. I'll look at the next slide. The next slide's right, sorry. But if the Senate Bill 650 passes, we're about $1 million in the good. And if it doesn't, if it passes, we're about 400,000 in the red. If it doesn't pass, keep mixing up, fails, sounds bad, fails is good. We're about $1 million in the good. That's hopefully what happens. And then we'll be able to come back with really good news and have a conversation about what do we want to do with it, right? So that's what I'm hoping for. This is kind of a long list of like, how do you get the 490 is actually accurate. We received notice this week that we didn't get the Stronger Connections grant. That's why that's updated. So I didn't get a chance to update the rest. So my apologies. So you can kind of goes through like the revenue declining enrollment reduction. So last year we had a bigger decline because prior year enrollments are falling off. So the exemption you get reduces as your number starts to flatten out a little bit, right? That's that. Transfer service, we don't think we'll get as much as we got last year. Certainly there were differences. The SRO is a big thing that we won't have that every year, right? The increase in the per pupil, and then trying to be really aggressive with CDs. So we're on pace to make about $1.25 million in CDs this year, which is great. We've been very attentive to like when we receive money from the state and trying to plan that out with payrolls to make sure we're like missing 3 days in a month is like, who cares? Well, multiply that over 12 months. That's a month. Like 1 month is $250,000. Like 3 days is a big deal, right? So trying to be very attentive to that. Why is it not at 1.25 million? Because rates. I have no clue what's going to happen with the feds. It's like all over the news. They haven't cut them yet. So most people get mad. I cheer. So that's my nightly thing. I was like, that's great news for us. So we'll see. So if they stay high, hopefully you can cheer too with me. If they don't, then this is probably closer to what it might be. And the other expenses we've talked about. So you can see a shortfall of 490. For those of you watching, this is like 5 times better than it normally is at this time. I think last year we set at $3 million. The year before that we were at 4. Like we're really ahead of the game. This just speaks to past years of like not building our own fiscal cliffs with ESSER. A lot of districts I've been in tune with other area schools like $4 or $5 million for budgets a third of our size. I mean, that's a mountain to climb over. So like $3 million to us is a molehill. It's a big deal still. I don't want to minimize that, but like this is something that we certainly should be able to work through and come clean with, even if it does pass. But cross your fingers. So what's next? We'll continue to work on FTE adjustments. That process goes through the end of the year, really. And then it's really driven by retirements and resignations. Dr. Robinson and I are doing staff rounds here the next month to have mini state conversations to talk about what's your future look like here in terms of compensation and culture. So we're trying to meet staff and have personal conversations with them intimately, 10, 15 people at a time, and hoping that helps us because keeping people is going to be, one of our biggest priorities here to make academic and culture and impacts like there. So 653, we talked about maximizing open enrollment seats and then future efficiencies if needed. And then the other budgeting things that don't impact our revenue are state updates on aid. That's going to impact mill rate tax levy. State updates equalized property value. Currently, we've been advised 6% for our community is the average about what it's going to be. That might be a little higher in other places, but net 6%. Statewide, they're planning 8%. So again, we're less than the state average potentially, which means we should receive more aid, which means our levy or mill rate should come down. So that's good news, especially leading into a referendum year. That's great news. Additional updates in the state around the tax levy is going to be coming in soon. And then really working at other budgets, 46, 50, 73, 80, a lot of work to do still there. But this is kind of like at a point where we stop and pause and kind of like start building those out because we have a lot of knowns there. So I think that's my last slide. So with that, I can take any questions. Our next meeting is in April, so we got about a month. So
Any questions from the board?
Good one.
Mr. Becker?
It was about the average class sizes. If my understanding is correct, we're looking at the total enrollment for the building and the total staffing to get the average class size.
Yep. And
the class size is really more like a student to teacher ratio, right?
yeah, yep.
So just looking at one of the bigger numbers, the 22 at Wilson. I understand there'll be some that are greater than 22 and there'll be some outliers. How do we approach, do we anticipate outliers? Like if we have a bigger class that's coming in, do we account for that in our staffing for the following year?
Yeah, so we, at the elementary level, again, so the projected enrollment, we roll over every grade. So like if we have 400 kids in first grade, we generally anticipate 400 at second grade, right? We roll it over. And then we take that number, we break it down by, if you're in first grade today, well, how many first graders at Wilson? And then we roll that over into next year, right? And so again, the 22 is the 92%. Those classes can be up to 24, 25. So we plan to have that. And then that extra, if that happens, schools at the elementary level, they run split level grade situations to try to break out like any like derivation from those numbers. But it's very rare that we have an entire school that where it would exceed a threshold where we have to add a staff. It has happened, but it's very rare. So a school at 22 to me, yeah, it's at 22, but the building average 21.5 because they have AGR, right? So those classes can't go over. So I look at 22 as the actual number because if those triplets move in, how are you going to manage that, right? So that's something we look at, and we look at by, 4K kindergarten, first, second. And so we have from now until really July to like make those adjustments if we need to. So
The other thing too, and it's something that I've learned over time, is that the principals have a lot of leeway on that. They kind of decide how many first grade classes rooms are going to have, how many second, if they're going to be split or not. I mean, somewhat in conjunction with their staff, but that's where sometimes 4K, it started out as fine, but then we had influx of 4K students weren't expecting there. Then all of a sudden they have one teacher and they have like 26 kids in the class because it just happened. And so there is some, but the district isn't dictating, you're going to have this many first grade classrooms, that sort of thing. That is a decision building that happens. I'm sorry, a building decision that happens. And so based on what the principal has decided to do can affect that. May result in higher class sizes in some grades over others, sometimes unintentionally based on what actually happens with the enrollment at that school. Unintended, like somebody moves in and there's much more 4K kids or kindergartners than we were expecting to have in that particular building, and they, budget one teacher versus two if they would have known that was going to happen.
the other odd thing that happens too, it's so hard to describe, but like it took me a few years to like figure out like it's nothing I can solve, which is frustrating, is across the state, like 90%, don't quote me on that, but like nearly every school across the state doesn't have 12-month elementary secretaries. They don't have them. And a lot of the school districts, like we're one of the bigger ones, so we have an enrollment center. Well, these smaller ones, you go to the school to enroll,
Yeah.
like a Whitefish Bay, you go to the school. Okay. So what they do is they have like one day a week where you come and enroll. And then what happens is they literally just stack them up. And then you go, so in July, I'm like, holy, whatever. How are we going to staff this school? Right. And so then I call over to the school and I'm like, oh, Brian, how many withdrawal? Okay, we got this. But then I'm like, I try not to overreact because then like in August, when everyone reports, all of a sudden, then I think I was talking to Terrence this year about all of a sudden a school drops 40 kids. So I can look back and go, what's been the change in August? Because then if the change in August is like 38 and they're at 60, I'm like, we probably got to add somebody. So it's like you kind of have to look a little deeper sometimes. But it took me like 3 years to figure out why this happens. I'm like, I can't solve this problem. It's like every district's problem, So I don't know. It's just weird how it works, I don't know. So yeah, there was some years of panic for a bit. So I got smarter.
Just to also add, we do get funds from Title I as well. So there are instances where there's a school has a high socioeconomic number, and we have extra dollars that could also be used to support an additional teacher at times. So that's also a consideration depending on the budget. But also with some of our schools who have high numbers of free and reduced lunch, they do have extra staff that are paid out of Title.
Thanks for the conversation, guys. It just seems like, just want to make sure as we're trying to really make these strides academically, that we're giving our teachers and schools support and making sure that our elementary kids are getting a good base before they move on to the challenges of middle school. Yeah.
Any other questions from the board? All right, well, thank you for that, Aaron. I will say, yes, some of you remember, we passed deficit budgets in June of $3 million, because you have to pass one in June, it's required, because you have to start the next year. So to be at worst case scenario at this number, at this point, is actually very good.
Really good.
Yeah.
So thank you for your work on that and your team, and look forward to the next meeting that we have in April. So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn, and then I'm gonna do the executive of the closed session right away, and then we can take a break, okay?
Yep.
Look for a motion and a second to adjourn and move in convene into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute Section 18.85 Parent 1 Parent G to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice regarding strategy related to a DPA boundary appeal.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We can get a roll call, please.
Yes. Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Sickich,
Yes.
Mr. Burns, Mrs. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mr. Becker,
Yes.
Ms. Steele,
Yes.
President Lee.
Yes, all right, we'll take a 5-minute recess to get set up for executive session.